All right, good morning, everyone. Excited to be a part of the MADPD process. I'm Ramona Maharg, and I'm here with Lisa Corbett, and today we're going to talk about write something. So getting your reluctant writers to write about something or anything. Just a reminder that if you have some questions, please put them on Twitter using the hashtag, or you can use the live chat box, so we'll try and monitor that. And if you are watching this later, when you're watching the recording and you want to ask questions of us, please contact us through Twitter. My handle is at Ramona Maharg. And Lisa, you are?
At Lisa Corbett 0261.
All right. So I am a special education teacher, and I teach in Southwestern Ontario in St. Thomas, Ontario. I have a special education high school aged congregated class. And writing is always a struggle for us, so I'm excited to share some of the things that we do. And Lisa, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
I teach a grade 2-3 class in North Bay, Ontario. I've been teaching primary most of my career, and reluctant writers are aplenty in the primary grades. It's very hard for them to get going.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for them to know that what they have to say is what they're supposed to be writing down.
And yeah, and that writing doesn't have to be maybe the more traditional route.
Yeah, and they don't have to wait for someone to tell them what to write. They can have ideas of their own that pop into their head that can become their writing.
All right, well, why don't you share one of the ideas that you use, and we'll kind of back and forth it, Lisa.
I'm a writer's workshop teacher. A lot of our writing is self-directed writing. Kids have ideas of their own that they're working on all the time. Sometimes they're working on a project that I'm giving them. So that they learn how to go through the whole writing process as a group. But a lot of times they're just working on projects that have meaning for them. And a couple of years ago, I discovered this book. Georgia Hurd is the author. It's called Heart Maps. She first talked about heart maps in a book she wrote about, now I'm not going to remember the name, but a book she wrote about teaching poetry. And this book really expands on that idea. So a heart map is just a heart template that kids decorate and color, and they make it fancy, and they write about the things that matter most to them. And so this becomes sort of a brainstorming organizer for the ideas that they might potentially turn into other writing projects. So there's a really good one about writing about the things that you love. And you just make a giant list of all the things that you love. Maybe you have a heart map about, this one is about wondering, things that you wonder about, things that you could turn into nonfiction kinds of writing. And so this is something that I often get started with in the fall. Have kids just make a heart map, what really matters to you. And then throughout the year, we can pull from it ideas that they can write about.
That's great, because it's not just one idea. When they get stuck another time during the year, it's right there for them.
Yeah, and I feel like it helps them connect to the fact that the story is inside of them. The story doesn't have to come from me. The story comes from them. And it doesn't have to just be story. Maybe what really matters to them is some nonfiction writing. I've got a little guy in my class right now who's a little bit obsessed with natural disasters. But that's a thing that he really is enjoying learning about. And so that's what a lot of his writing has been about for about a month. And that's important too.
Yeah, I love that idea, because some of them, I have kids who have different disabilities, and so the creative writing sometimes is difficult for them. But if it's nonfiction, or if it's a biography, or if it's something they would love to talk about, then it's still writing. I have a young lady who's just finishing up a book she's creating for us on giraffes, and she's obsessed with giraffes. So we are learning all about giraffes, and she's making a book for us. And then her next plan is to turn it into a video.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so she is creating the book in Book Creator app, and so she's bringing in pictures and information from there, and then she's going to app smash that with iMovie and turn it into a video, so that then she has that authentic audience too. So it's important that it's not just me who's going to read it, it's her classmates, it's her family, it's whoever wants to see it on YouTube when she puts it on her YouTube channel.
Yeah, that authentic audience, that's really important, isn't it? I would imagine so, even more so for your high school students than for my primary age students.
Yeah, I think so, because, they get sick of just my comments, but if they know it's going to be out there and that someone else is going to see it, then they are really, really engaged in making sure their facts are right and making sure that it looks good and that they look good.
A couple of weeks ago, you shared out on Flipgrid some poems They had written poems and were,
Mhm.
I guess, performing their poem on Flipgrid. How
Yes.
did that help them with that audience piece?
They like that. They don't like the poetry as much as they like the like just writing, because they
Yeah,
think sometimes they find that the poem has some rules. Although that was a pretty simple poem that didn't have a lot of rules, but
right.
they don't like when we write haikus that they're supposed to stick to that format.
Yes.
So I think that they did enjoy doing it, but they certainly love that people, I mean, yourself and Leanne got on there and left them some comments, and they thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it's fun to have extra people to comment on things that you say.
Mhm.
Um, Last year, at the end of last year, the carpet that was in my room was beyond disgusting, and it was time for it to go. And so at the beginning of this year, I had my class write letters to our principal, and they had to tell her why we needed a new carpet. And they had to come up with, a couple of different reasons. And we talked about how she didn't care if you really, 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 really want one. She cared about other things, how it was going to help you learn and how it was going to help you be comfortable so you could do your work. And they loved being able to write that letter to the principal. I could have easily just walked in and said to her, "Hey, we need a new carpet." And she already knew the reasons why I needed a new carpet. And she would have bought me a carpet and that would have been the end of it. But by turning it into a writing activity, um, I think everybody got a little bit more out of it. And then she wrote back to them. So their response from her was a letter explaining how she thought that they had really good reasons. And just that whole community piece of me and the principal and the kids talking about why we needed this, that authentic audience made all the difference for them.
Yeah, and we did letters too for the global read aloud. So they were
Mm,
writing letters to students in different schools all over the world, and that made letter writing really exciting for them, where it could be kind of a boring task if you just kind of set, okay, you're going to write a letter for this, but if it's not going to be sent,
right.
then it doesn't mean anything to them. So when they know that they're writing to other kids in other countries and other places about the book that we've just shared, their interest in it is so much increased, and they do a much better job.
Yeah, I've got right now on my desk something from the Great Canadian Mail Race. I think
Ah,
every year I end up with at least one letter. Someone has randomly chosen our school, and I get a letter addressed to grade 3 teacher at my school, and I've got a couple kids who are going to write back to somebody who will write back to the child that wrote to us, and then they'll write out to other schools that we randomly choose. And it's a lot of fun to think I'm going to get a letter back someday.
yeah. What's that called again? I got to check that out.
The Great Canadian Mail Race.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe we'll send one to you.
That would be cool.
Then you can be in the chain.
Yes. And something I want to chat about too is that we sometimes write out of things that the kids don't really think that is writing. So we did a whole week. Well, it was started with a week at the Dairy Museum in Ontario, south of Elmer. And it was kind of a maker activity. So they were learning about ice cream, how it's made. And then they had to propose their own new flavor for an ice cream. So they had to write a proposal for this ice cream and what would be in it. And they had to send it to the factory chief, who was one of the museum staff, and get it approved. And then once it was approved, we actually made the ice cream and we tried it all out and had a whole taste test situation. And then they had to come up with labels, and they had to come up with advertising. So they had to do print advertising and as well as a video for the new ice cream and why people should buy it and what it tastes like. And so they had to do all the writing for that, and they didn't even realize they were doing it. They had a great time, and of course they got to eat ice cream. So what's
Nice.
bad about that?
What was the
Now,
best?
what was the best? The best I think was there was one with peanut butter and chocolate, and it had Reese's Pieces in it, and caramel. It was really delicious.
Nice.
But then the worst was one of them decided to make hot dog ice cream, so it was pieces of hot dogs and ketchup and mustard, and it was not only did it look disgusting, it tasted
I
disgusting.
can imagine.
But you can imagine what his video for his TV commercial turned out to be was quite hysterical.
Yeah.
But it was neat too, because we were able to combine the maker process with the writing process,
Mhm.
and it didn't seem like work for them.
Those connections to other curriculum areas I think are really important as well. because it shows that we're going to use it throughout our day. We're not just going to do writing during this half-hour block of time or 45-minute block of time. You're going to be writing all day long. It's going to go on, and you're going to need to know how to do that in lots of different areas.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, I had the gym teacher at our school started teaching basketball, and a couple of boys in my class came out of gym, had their lunch, and went outside to recess, and were excited to play basketball, and realized for the first time there was no basketball hoop in our yard. And they came back in just livid. They could not believe that there was no basketball hoop in the yard, and that they were in their 5th year at our school and were just barely noticing that. But they started on a project that there was some writing involved. They wrote out a presentation. They recorded themselves on the presentation. We added their recording to some PowerPoint, and they presented to the parent council, asking them for a new basketball hoop in the yard for kids to play with. They went around the school and did a survey so that in their PowerPoint they could say 78% of the kids at our school would enjoy having this basketball hoop to play with at recess. It was a really, really good project. Really meaningful to them. There was some math in there. There was some oral language in there. There was some media literacy in there. And this summer, that basketball hoop is going to be finally installed. So that'll be really cool for them to be able to go out and play basketball and know this is here because we did all of that work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you and I both have kind of talked a little bit about how important it is for the teacher to be flexible in the programming. That was not a project that I had planned. Like, in the month of February, we're going to do persuasive writing, and everybody's going to think of something to persuade someone. That was something that authentically came up out of a need that they had, and I grabbed it and ran with it.
Yeah, amazing. Now I'm just checking the Twitter stream, and Joy Kerr is watching us from the Chicago area. So hi, Joy. Thanks for watching. All right, so you just shared that the basketball. I want to talk about some cartoons too, because I know that some kids, you and I have talked about, sometimes they struggle with the storyboarding of it or how to make it all work. And I love to use stuff like comics to do that. And then you have to get a little techie. So if you're in Ontario, you can use pixton.com to create cartoons, and that is an amazing little program. It's free to all publicly funded schools in Ontario. But even if you're not, it's probably well worth the fee that they charge. And it gives the kids a chance to think about how the story is going to progress, how the plot works, how to create the characters, what should they look like. And my kids will they would spend like weeks or months on that if I didn't put an end date on some of the stuff.
Right.
They love it. And then if you don't have Pixton or your Google school, you can use Google Slides to create cartoons as well. It's a little more labor intensive, so you might want to save that maybe for your older students, but it's free if you're a Google school, and it's a way you can do that as well. And there's lots of videos for how to do that. And you said that you like to use it as well.
We have used Pixton, for sure. We have used Pixton. But my students actually really love just plain old paper comics. You can get free templates all over the internet that just has the squares and the rectangles, and some of them have speech bubbles in them, and which my students need because they need that reminder that there should be some words here with your story, not just pictures. And they will create pages and pages of comic books. And for some of my students, the idea that there's, a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, something needs to happen in your story. There needs to be some action for the reader to carry on with. And the difference between dialogue and the rest of the story is something that they need practice with in primary grades. And so comics, I know some people think that they're kind of a waste of time, but I feel like they really set the child up to figure out, what does a story look like? How can it progress from one event to the next? How can I add dialogue to keep the story flowing along? And it gives them something really cool, an end product that they can share out with their friends and that they can show off in an author's chair.
Yeah, and we did a whole superhero, everyday superhero unit where we used Pixton as well, and we were using some of the sustainable sustainable development goals. And they had to pick a goal and decide how their superhero would solve that. And then they did the writing through Pixton, created their superhero. And it didn't have to be a huge thing. Maybe it was recycling, or maybe it was eating food that's grown locally or sourced locally. And it didn't have to be a huge cartoon, but I mean, they got a heck of a lot out of it.
I love that idea. We're right in the middle of plants and animals units in science right now, and we need to talk about how humans impact the plants and animals in their area, and that might be a really good connection for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do it. It's fun.
Yeah, they would love that.
And something that I'm about to start, I haven't done it yet, so I don't know how well it will go because we're a Google school. We are going to use Tour Builder to build some stories. So they're going to go into Tour Builder, which, if you don't know about it, it's a Google product as well. It's free. But you go in and you can add in maps and set locations and add in pictures and text and create a tour. So for example, if they were going to go on a trip they all want to go to Disneyland. So if they were going to go to Disneyland, they have to show each step on the tour that they're taking, the different things they're doing, and add in pictures. And then once they've got their tour built, I'm going to have them screencast it and talk about their whole trip. And hopefully we can get some writing out of creating those tours.
Oh, that's a great idea. That reminds me of Leanne's first colonizers on Mars on the Edunauts website. That would be a fun link for them.
And that would be a great way to get kids writing too. Let's talk about how would you colonize Mars? What would you bring?
Yeah.
Who would you bring with you? Remember, you got to spend an awful lot of time with those people.
One of the things that I always try to have kids doing is writing about things that I don't tell them to write about, but their own ideas, things that they have brewing in their head. And this is a book that has helped us a little bit. I haven't used it as much as I thought I would when I bought it, but as I'm looking at it this weekend, I'm realizing I've missed an opportunity because there's a lot of good stuff in here. But one of the ideas in here are these story starters. They're little discs of wood, and I painted little prompts, I guess, on them. And so I have about 25 of them in a basket, and they have pictures of all sorts of things on them. And we close our eyes and you pick 3 of them out and see what story you can tell. So if you pick a campfire and you pick a school building and you pick, I don't even know, a hamburger, then what story can you craft that has those things in it? And often just picking one out, because I have primary students, they'll pick one out and they'll look at it and they'll say, oh, this one time, and then they're off with the story. So just little prompts like that can be all it takes to get them going.
Yeah, and something that I was doing some research to see, some ideas for this, and I was reading, I can't even remember what blog I was reading, and they also reminded, if you have students who are non-English speakers, let them write in their own language. And then you can use Google Translate if you need to decipher it. But they're so much more comfortable when they're writing in their own language. And the writing is more important, perhaps. The story is more important in their own language than it is for them to get them to write it in English. Or have them partner with another student who helps them translate it.
I work at an immersion school. And so we have, I teach in the English stream, but about 2/3 of our teachers are French immersion teachers. And the kids who are most successful in their writing, as they, starting in grade 3, they are writing in English and in French. So they have 2 different literacy blocks throughout the day with 2 different teachers. And the kids that are having the most success are the kids whose teachers are coordinating. So if you're doing a unit on story in English, you're also doing that in French, so that everything you're learning in English, you take with you into French, and everything you're doing for persuasive writing in English, you take it with you into French, because they're learning it in their natural language, and that they can take it with them into their new language.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
All right. Other ideas?
Yeah, I want to talk about one more book. You can tell I read a lot of books about writing. This one is called Joyride. Ralph Fletcher is the author. He's written many, many books on writing workshop and writers in general. In this book, he talks about how, a lot of people, especially in the US, less us, but certainly us as well, there comes this point where you're moving from unit to unit to unit to unit. And the kids are writing a letter unit. And then when they're done with the letter unit, they're doing a story unit. When they're done with the story unit, they're doing a nonfiction unit. And they never get a chance to find the joy in the writing. They never get a chance to write about the thing that matters to them. But when I'm writing about what matters to me. I'm not writing for someone else. And even if I had an assignment to do, there would still be some authentic pieces of myself in that writing. So in this book, he advocates a lot for what he calls greenbelt writing, those spans of time in between the required writing when kids can just go for it. They can write about the thing that matters most to them. I would say I have a larger balance. We have short units and then lots of time to write about what matters to us. But he says, go ahead and do your long unit that's required by your district or that's required by your curriculum. But then in between, give them 2 or 3 weeks when they can just go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something else I wanted to bring up too is like choose your own adventure writing. My kids love doing this, and if you want to do it digitally, I borrowed a template from Sylvia Duckworth. So if you go to Sylvia Duckworth, I believe it's .com, on her website, she has a whole resource section, and it's a template you can use with Google Slides that helps them create the choose your own adventure, because sometimes the logistics of choosing your own adventure can be a little bit more difficult. So if you want to use that, but the kids love doing a choose your own adventure and then playing with how it's going to end up.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I've never done a unit like that before.
Yeah, and sometimes there's some very strange disasters that befall you.
I can imagine.
Always enjoyable. I think one time we were sucked up in a tornado, just like like the Wizard of Oz.
Oh dear. Huh. Well, that would be an adventure.
It was an adventure, yes.
Yeah.
And we also do a lot of oral stories because my students, they have their own challenges, and so sometimes the physical writing is difficult. So we use things like Flipgrid or allowing them to screencast their story using whatever, whether they use iTunes or iMovie or Screencast, and to just tell their story that way, because sometimes it's really difficult for them to get it on paper, or use that as their starter. Tell the story in a video or on Flipgrid and then convert it into the written word. Right,
because the ideas can be coming out so fast and their hand just can't keep up. That's frustrating.
Mm-hmm. And it becomes more theirs if they tell it out that way, as opposed to just having a scribe, because then if I'm scribing for them, I can't keep up with them.
Yeah.
Whereas if there's a video, they can hit pause and then write from there, or they can hit pause and go, oh, I just thought of something I want to add. Let's put that in now.
Yeah, I love that idea. I've been working this year on a TLLP, Teacher Learning Leadership project, and it's been a good one. And we started out really focusing on self-regulation during writing time, because we had so many kids who had a hard time just with their stamina with writing and keeping busy that whole time and making sure that they're writing that whole time. And so we were looking really closely at the obstacles that might be getting in their way. And we came up with a really good document, which I will share out later, where we came up with lists of things. If they're having this problem, then try this strategy. If they're having this problem, then try that strategy. And we talked a lot about that coordination piece. Kids who are just sort of physically having a hard time with the writing. Their pencil grip is kind of funny. Their hand gets tired really quickly. In the primary grades, it's tricky to know when to move to technology for some of them, because you want to move at just the right time. If you go too early, then they won't develop those fine motor skills that they need for so many things in life. And it becomes too easy and they won't ever want to go back to using a pencil and a pen. So we talked, one of our strategies was to make sure that they have pencil grips if they need them, choosing different kinds of paper that they could write on, because some kids need wider lines than other kids. Some kids need colored paper to write on. Some kids need a pen instead of a pencil, or a pencil instead of a pen. And so we have to be flexible in that. We also talked about how some kids, they actually do have the stamina to write for half an hour, but they need to stand up and walk around in between. So they need to write for 10 or 15 minutes and then go for a little walk around the class. And previously, we might have seen that as time wasting. You know, you get up 3 times to sharpen your pencil, but maybe that's helping some of them just to take a break. I know if I'm writing a blog post, a long one, I write it, and then I might get up and do some dishes or put some laundry in the washing machine and then come back to it, because that little tiny space in between the working periods just gets me going again.
Yeah, sometimes you need it to percolate a little bit in your head, right?
Yeah.
And I think the kids need that too. And I think flexible seating helps with that too.
Mhm.
Sometimes sitting at the desk, the ideas aren't flowing, but then if you have a beanbag chair or a rocking chair and they sit there and you can almost see the cogs turning in their head.
Yeah.
About, okay, I think I know where I'm going next.
Yeah, I have lots of clipboards in my room. Lots of kids like to kind of snuggle up with their writing, and so they'll be like this, and they'll be all hunched over. And I think, how can you possibly write comfortably like that? But that's because I'm not comfortable like that. They're totally comfortable like that.
Yeah, yeah. And let them do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of them like a noisy environment, and some of them like a quiet environment. So some of them want to write kind of in the back corner where there's a kind of quiet, cozy spot. Some of them want to be in the heat where everybody else is. Some of them want the radio on. Some of them want to listen to their music. And it's just kind of adapting to what works best for them.
Something that we haven't talked about is graphic organizers. Do you use those a lot in your writing?
I do sometimes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know when I first started teaching, graphic organizers were the answer to everything. And every unit of writing had to start with the graphic organizer and how to fill out that graphic organizer.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I've really kind of given up on them, certainly as a beginning point for most kids. Some kids definitely still need them. But for some kids, filling out the graphic organizer became such a barrier because they didn't know what was going to happen in their story. They couldn't plan it out until they started doing their writing.
Or sometimes I have them sketch it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want to draw this out to give yourself an idea, then draw it out. Or if you need to see the scene, how it's going to look on paper visually before you start writing about, then go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get quite as it's not the be all and end all now. If a student wants one to kind of help them graph it out, then great. And if not, then that's okay too.
It used to be a really standard thing to add to an IEP as well.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure they had a graphic organizer. And I resist that for some kids because the amount of time and energy they put into the graphic organizer becomes overwhelming and makes them hate the project because they don't have a plan and they can't come up with a plan in advance. They need to get the story started. And then maybe in the middle of it, they'll sit down and sketch out their plan, right? Or maybe at the end of it, they can't even tell you what their plan was. And so the graphic organizer isn't the answer for everyone, but it is the answer for some people.
Mm-hmm. Do you blog with your students?
I do not blog with them. We have some I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it. We have some rules around that in our board that make it difficult to be doing with younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
Even the signing in process for us, you have to sign in with your first name and your last name and the day of your birthday. Yeah. That makes me want to go home and start drinking at 3:30 in the afternoon some days. So, and I don't even drink. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't blog with them. No.
Yeah. I have blogged in the past. The group I have now, it's not working. That doesn't work as well for them. So we use Flipgrid and do like video, like vlogging instead. So that works really well with them. But I know that when I did blog, sometimes just the process for some of them of logging in is difficult. But I know that there's lots of students or lots of teachers in my board who do blog with them, and that authentic audience of blogging is amazing too.
Yeah. Yeah. There are lots of opportunities for people who are not even that child's teacher to read their blog and make a few comments on it if they're feeling generous about marking a kid that's not even their student, not marking, but commenting on it, right? Giving them something nice to say and giving them some compliments.
Yeah, that's the whole, the citizenship piece of that, saying like what is constructive criticism and what's just being a troll. And so there's a lesson to be learned out of that as well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can't see the comments section of this. Can you see that in?
I don't
on your
know.
screen?
I don't even know how to do that. There, I have a little box that says enter chat messages, and there's nothing there.
Okay, so it sounds like there are no questions then,
No.
because if there were, they would be there. And
Okay.
I've been monitoring our hashtag on Twitter, and I don't see anything there. There are people watching us, so thank you for watching us.
Yes.
Do you have anything you want to add, Lisa, before we close this for today?
I'm just looking at my pile in my list. I'm going to recommend one more book because
Yeah, absolutely.
apparently I'm on a roll with that. Actually, I'm going to recommend three more books.
Perfect.
I don't know if I can find the one I wanted to grab. One of them I couldn't find at all. Colleen Cruz has written a beautiful book called The Unstoppable Writing Teacher. And it's all about, here's the problem, here's a possible solution. If you're seeing this problem, here's a solution for that problem. And I really recommend that because it's all about using your conferring time with kids to really target what is actually that child's issue that's giving them some difficulty. This is another little mini book also written by Colleen Cruz, and it's called Reaching Struggling Writers. It's about 30 pages, 79 pages. It's super quick to read. And again, it's just about taking those kids that are having a little bit of an extra hard time and figuring out what to do with them. And then finally, again, you can see I've had this problem a lot because I have a lot of books that I've read to help me with that. This one is called Enticing Hard to Reach Writers. Ruth Ayres is the author of this. She talks about some children. She is actually a mom who's adopted all of her children through foster care. And because they've spent some time in foster care before they've come to her nice, loving home, they have issues, quite a lot of them. Well, I say quite a lot. She's only got 4 of them, but a few of them have some really hard life difficulties. And this book is all about just understanding that life gets in the way for some kids sometimes, and how can we help them use writing to make it through those really difficult times in their life. So I highly recommend that book. It's a quick read and a lot of good story to it. And make sure you've got some Kleenex by you because you're going to cry when you're reading it.
And I just remembered something else that I sometimes will do. We'll have an author Skype in or Google Hangout with us and talk about the writing process. And for our kids, that's very exciting to hear that writers of books that they enjoy also struggle sometimes and have points where they can't get anything down on paper. And I always see a real burst in the kids' writing after we do that. And the authors, many of the authors who are out there are just more than happy to do that. And you never know unless you ask and throw a little please out there on Twitter. They can only say no, and if they say yes, it's amazing.
Well, I've had that as well. We haven't Skyped with anybody, but just on Twitter to put out a question, and they'll often just answer your question back, and I can put it up on the screen, and the kids can see that real author answered my question, and now I can go be a real author and use that information. So yeah, it's exciting to do that for sure.
All right. Anything else you want to share before we go?
No, I think we've covered everything. I don't know what we could possibly talk about next.
Well, I think we're going to be talking about poetry next at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to talk to us again, and we're going to have hopefully Leanne Hanson joining us at 5 p.m. Eastern time on MADPD once again to talk about using poetry in the classroom, and it's going to be a really exciting discussion. So hopefully you can join us. Lisa, thanks for being a part of this today.
Thanks, Ramona, and thanks for not letting me back out this morning.
No way, Jose. And thanks to everyone who listened to us live, because that's amazing to get up early on a Sunday morning and join us.
I'm really looking forward to more of these presentations. They go on all day, so I'm hoping to pop in and out and catch a few more. Yeah,
catch that master schedule and check out what's going on. And if you can't catch it live, the great thing about MADTV is, of course, or MADPD is that you can watch the videos afterwards on YouTube. So it's great PD the day of, but it keeps going on and on.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a great day, everyone. And hopefully, I know I'm going to be seeing Lisa at 5 o'clock, but hopefully we see you at 5 o'clock for some poetry.
Yeah. Thanks, Ramona.
Yeah. Bye now.
Bye-bye.